joy of being in Adelaide during Fringe, I cannot get anywhere else. I honestly love Fringe in Adelaide more than any other festival I've ever been to.
Honey, what would Adelaide be without the Fringe? I mean, it would be like it is the rest of the year. Let that sink in, darlings.
Not be happy when you're here at Fringe time. It is massively infectious.
The warm weather, everyone's intense, there's just people walking around, everyone's happy, Rundle Street's full of people, all the side laneways are full of people.
It's just got that magical carny feeling to it, you know. It's like something Enid Blyton wrote, you know, like, but it's on the ground, it's not the top of the magic faraway tree.
It's sort of rambunctious and ratbag and a bit stupid and fun. A bit like Australian rules, really. It's the Australian rules of the arts. And it's the yang to the festival's yin.
I think the Fringe is the festival in many ways. It's the festive part. It's the celebration of people and it provides the greatest proportion of the atmosphere.
Of course, the Fringe is pure fiesta. Revelry in the streets.
It's chaos! Oh, yeah. There's nuts things going on!
I think a lot of people in Adelaide don't realise how enormous this event is on the world stage.
The Fringe was like this explosion. The world turned up in Adelaide. I thought that was a normal thing at the time, but that wasn't normal. That is an amazing thing that has been happening in Adelaide for decades.
There's over 1,000 shows and anything goes. As long as it's legal, you can do it.
You can do anything you like. You can pop out into the street and become part of the Fringe. Anybody can. You can, I can, anyone can.
It's different, it's irreverent, and it's attracting huge audiences.
Adelaide Fringe is left of centre. When I went to see some of these shows, it was like, what? You know, and some of them are brilliant.
What they've got to be prepared to do is to take a risk because in many ways we don't know what are the good shows until they really happen.
You do take a punt sometimes, and not all of it's gold. Some of it's just batshit crazy.
People say to me, but what if it's not very good? And I'm like, so what? It's the Fringe.
I have been obsessed with shit and toilets all my life.
Sometimes the shows you talk most about are the shows that you're not quite sure what I just saw.
But occasionally you see something that changes your mindset, that is profound, that has an ability to alter your thinking.
There's always been a Fringe at the same time as there's been a festival, right from the earliest days when it started in 1960.
It's a long way back, long before any of you young people were born.
None of this would have happened without the Queen Mother. The only good thing she ever did, really.
A charming, warm-hearted, smiling lady visiting us again after an absence of 30 years.
The Queen Mum came out in '58, and this sort of put a buzz around town.
And they put on a royal water pageant for her, and she came down the Torrens on a barge. There was music in the advertiser sound shell and dancing, and everybody thought, what a wonderful idea, let's have a festival. And it became a small high arts festival.
The Festival of Arts, as it was in the 60s, created a huge wave amongst the people of Adelaide. And I think there would have been several smaller groups of amateur artists that wanted to be involved in this great wave that was going through the city.
Some of our local artists said, well, we'd like to be showing our stuff as well in a festival. And so they started doing their things off the festival or the Fringe, on the fringe of the festival.
And that's, I suppose, how the Fringe started. In 1960, with a couple of shows, Roger Shepherd was in that first review, We're At It Again. In those early decades, the festival was high art.
someone thinks, well, that's a bit toffee, we're going to start our own thing. It's going to be more open and we'll accept anyone.
So they were like, well, some of the best stuff is in Adelaide, let's put our own stuff on. And that's really how the Fringe was born.
This is
Aboriginal programs in the Fringe have appeared throughout the decades.
From Magpie Theatre's funeral and circuses to a Dreamtime fashion parade, this will be the largest ever gathering of Aboriginal performers in the Fringe's history.
But we've made a big effort in the last few years to increase Aboriginal participation in the Fringe.
Went from Didge playing into being a part of an opening night, and then with the parade, when the parade started up, we were a part of the parade, and then we started leading the parade. And the Fringe has been very, very important, being respectful in that way and saying, yeah, you can come into our circle too now, and we'll meet like that so we can grow together.
For the last couple of years, we've done a Ghana ceremony, a welcome to country, an acknowledgement, an opening of the Fringe. In the first years, a couple of hundred people. And then this year, over 20,000 people came.
We pulled together a big story, actually, which is called Cabaret, a big collaborative story about this place, about the country, and giving people an understanding about what it actually means and has meant to us, First Nations people, for thousands of years, maybe a couple of thousand generations. You've got to be strong, and people need to see that because you're representing your ancestors, your peoples, country, stories that are thousands of years old, you know.
It was a really deeply moving and culturally powerful piece. It was something we were really proud to present.
For us as the first people of this country, being able to have that platform to go, here, we would like you now to tell your story in your way, how you'd like to tell it, and being supported to do that has been awesome, and it's been a highlight. So the dreaming goes on.
It's funny, there's a lot of apocryphal myths of the Fringe in the 70s. The 60s and 70s are a bit of a blur of what was the Fringe.
The official festival organisers were always surprised at the number of ancillary activities that occurred.
I don't really know what's happening here, but if I could just understand.
The Fringe had been growing, and it kept on growing. When I came back to Australia in '74, already there was about 100 shows in the Fringe.
What do we have now? We have a nation of cultural consumers.
But it wasn't an organisation.
Frank Ford formalised the Fringe at Dunstan's invitation.
Dunstan said, I want you to organise the Fringe because, it's growing. And so I organised the Fringe, saying the philosophy is that it's an open platform for the arts.
So Frank, of course, contacted me in those early days and said, well, you're a mover and a shaker. Come along and help me get this Fringe started, you see, in a more formal way.
I mean, if Frank Ford's the father of the Fringe, Marjorie is definitely the mother. And together they were an incredible duo.
Frank then said, let's use an open platform for Australian talent. We were trying to develop the culture in our own environment. So the Fringe was born in a more formal sense. Because we got such a response from the community, that was the great thing.
It's got to the stage now where people are more interested very often in the Fringe things than they are in the festival itself.
It did become the national showcase for Australian works, for new talent and new works.
The energy of the arts in the nation was in Adelaide for 10 to 15 years, thanks only to Dunstan.
Adelaide was a centre of the arts in Australia.
It's like Camelot. For one brief shining moment in the 70s, thanks to him, we led the nation in terms of the arts.
Every city claims to be the city of light, but here's one that really is.
I honestly think what makes Adelaide Fringe unique is the people and the mood they're in. Like, everyone appears to be happy at the same time.
Melbourne sees a lot of comedy, and so Melbourne is a little bit more make me laugh, whereas Adelaide is like, what have we got?
Because, of course,
the Fringe has existed for 60 years, Adelaide audiences were often much more sophisticated when it came to comedy than maybe other cities in Australia, and generous, really generous in terms of letting you make mistakes and being open to new things.
So you have an audience here in Adelaide that between the Adelaide Festival and the Fringe really is a sophisticated audience of connoisseurs.
An art bit coming up. I know you beggars like art in Adelaide.
What was great about the Adelaide audiences, they were prepared to come and see weird, interesting, phenomenal, new ideas, and in great numbers. And it was extraordinarily exciting to be part of that in the early days.
The Fringe is a place where you and the audience are not separate. The green room basically is outdoors, so you're just hanging out.
When I'm at the Fringe, I kind of walk around the gardens and say hi to people, and people say hi to me, and I think that's a very important thing. You know.
That crux of artists and punters being together is always a part of what the Fringe is.
And the great thing about the Fringe is it inhabits the city. And when you get a Fringe festival that inhabits the city, takes over the city, the energy of it's fantastic.
Of course, Hindley Street, down the one end you had the Fringe, and then you sort of had a red light district. By the time you hit the top of it, there were just guys hooning around in Monaros asking you to suck them off. So there was really something for everyone in those days, and it was just all on the one street, so it was handy.
Cabaret is the Fringe's forte. There's lots of it. It makes up the bulk of the programme.
70s and 80s, the Fringe was plays. Then, in the late 80s into the 90s, the modern cabaret movement, that took over. It's the vaudeville of the great unwashed.
I'm in Adelaide, the big town, yeah, the big festival. Woo!
Bob Down, the Kransky sisters, the Doug Anthony All-Stars, all that lot.
Some of my strongest memories of the Fringe are going to that big tin shed down at the Lion Arts Centre. No doubt these days it would have been condemned for occupational health and safety reasons, but it felt cavernous.
It was a terrific space because there was warehouses and weird sort of industrial towers, and there were lots of spaces to make theatres big and small, and it really hopped.
86 was our first year. Didn't know really what to expect, but it was phenomenal when we got here. We worked a lot in Rundle Street Mall, busking because we were buskers. That's where we secured our audience. And we started selling out very quickly at Little Sisters, which was at the Lion Fowler Jam Factory. Just had a galvo roof and long, sort of very uncomfortable seats. But the atmosphere in the place was extraordinary.
And there's a group of young fellas, all gorgeous, little young, handsome fellas, and they were as bright as 6 buttons, and they were going to sing, and I thought, oh, well, okay. And they were charming. They sang well, they were melodic, just blew me away. I thought, well, gee, you're good material, you are.
And they were outrageous for the time, and I must admit I fell slightly in love with Paul McDermott. That voice coming out of this angry little man who appeared somewhere between a Nazi stormtrooper and Adam Ant, you know.
And the show kept getting better and better and better. Working night after night after night, that just pulls everything together when you're working that much. So it was a real extraordinary experience. When we came to Adelaide the first time, it was like finding a fraternity of like-minded people, like Flacco and Bob Down, the Castanet Club, funny stories, and some phenomenal groups. Tick were applicable.
Time Australia was very, very flat with lots of jolly, happy hunters and collectors around.
Wonderful performers doing something incredibly different at the time. It was the energy that was fantastic at the Fringe then. And the atmosphere was quite reckless. There was a lot of chaos. There was a lot less control. The things that we were doing on stage now, we would not be able to do. The way we got people into the venue occasionally, we'd take people outside the venue, we'd do all sorts of things that would now be considered too dangerous or illegal or problematic or something.
Memories of breaking OC health and safety rules is always funny when you think about the Fringe in the old days.
We'd be closed down within a second, I think, if we tried some of the stuff we tried back in the 80s.
Fortunately, they became the act of the year that year, and with the advertiser money that they received, off they went to Edinburgh and they wowed them over there.
We're no longer strangers. Hi Tim, how are you? Good, thanks. Piss off, Richard.
And how wonderful, they've set a career for themselves. Wonderful.
Well, what I find so intriguing is that Adelaide does all of its festivals at once.
This is the thing about Adelaide in March. You know, you think that really one city couldn't deal with all of these events at once, and then somehow we just can.
It does the Fringe, it does the motor race, it does Wome Adelaide, it does the Festival of Roadworks, that's always running when I'm here.
And you can just tell the tribes by what they're wearing. The drawstring cotton trousers and the sandals of the Wome Adelaide people, and the black kiss tops of the Adelaide 500, and then all the Fringe people with their extraordinary robust beards but a lot of glitter, or their weird frocks, all converging. I don't know, that doesn't happen anywhere else in the world, that particular moment.
I think a lot of artists are a little bit frustrated that the car race happens at exactly the same time as the Fringe.
It can be distracting if you're in a tent and you can just hear like really loud mosquitoes kind of going all the time. It sounds like we're about to be invaded by Mad Max and other people.
March is ridiculous, isn't it? It is impossible to imagine Adelaide without the Fringe. The Fringe is this amazing part of this state's history and self-awareness and opening up to the world.
What the Adelaide Fringe is about stuff that you can't really measure. Like, it's about the social impact, it's about the happiness, it's about the well-being.
It's about pushing the boundaries. That's what art should be about. If we're making art or creating art, it should reflect either a decaying or a improving society and create opportunities to have those discussions in different spaces.
It brings culture to its community. It gives it a great sense of community.
Was a place of sanctuary for all outsiders. They weren't standing around checking to find out what your sexual orientation was.
The promise of the internet has failed. It's not bringing us together, it's isolating us.
It's a continent, Jerry.
One of the important things about the Fringe is that it reinstates city space. It brings us back into downtown. It brings us back into the city.
Get used to it, people!
This is one of the greatest things that the Fringe really offers, is for people to meet face to face.
The only thing important on this planet is your interchange with people, because it's too easy to do this. You know, and it just won't work.
It's about bringing people together. People engaging, communities engaging, people walking away and talking about different things that they've experienced and the new learnings that they take away.
From right here in Adelaide, ladies and gentlemen!
This is the importance of Adelaide as a cultural capital in the world.
Obviously, when you have something like the Fringe and it's as huge as it is, that is going to affect a city's culture. It's going to, well, fingers crossed, make the general public go, we want to get more involved with the arts. Maybe we'll take the fluffy dice off the Monaro and go and see some Chekhov.
90s and on, it's been comedians. Comedy is the hardest thing to do. It's also the cheapest.
The promoters of the comedians discovered that they could play Adelaide on the way to the Melbourne Comedy Festival. All of a sudden we had a horde of comedians coming here.
There was a lot of nudity happening. That's what I seem to remember more than anything.
In fact, I've seen some acts that I wonder whether it is art, actually, or just nudity.
And really, those first few festivals I did, I was just drunk and having sex with other comedians.
But how amazing to perform in show tents that have been travelling the world for, you know, nearly 100 years.
There's so much noise going on outside the tent. There's people on rides. Akmal last year came to do his first Fringe in the gardens, and he's like freaking out about the noise. I say, mate, you'll learn to love the noise.
It's
stand-up in particular is a pretty solitary job. So it was such a great thing to do to be able to hang out with comedians and talk about the job, and that's how you learn.
The early part of 2000, you had the circus people coming back.
Grungy circuses from Canada. If you went to Canada, no one home with in March. They're all here in a tent, juggling chainsaws.
By 2000, you had those old carny skills, lying on a bed of nails, putting your face on glass. We could do burlesque. That atmosphere I thought was incredible. The carnival atmosphere, it seemed to be very dominant.
In the 2000s, that's when Fringe really took a huge leap in terms of having all these hubs. The Spiegel tent arrived in the East End. That sort of became the Garden of Unearthly Delights. Then Gluttony came along, Croquet Club and Tuxedo Cat and Rhino Room.
What seems like too many entertainment facilities for Adelaide, and yet somehow Adelaide just goes, yep, we'll absorb all of that.
So many people who have ended up enormous names, household names, basically launched their career at the Adelaide Fringe.
The Fringe gave me a voice as a singer. I have 2 albums coming out this year. I guess now that I'm saying it, I owe it all to the Fringe.
My first actual on-stage performance at the Fringe was just a deeply, as Kevin Rudd once said, buttock-clenching moment. Although he wasn't referring to my play, he was referring to the global financial crisis. But, you know, same feeling.
You know, Hans is a perfect example of someone who's been able to build.
The Mars Bar, they gave us the venue for free. And that really kind of, gave me a few years to get the show up and running.
You know, when Hans first started, he wasn't that polished, but he was funny, and there was a germ of magic that just needed to be honed through those performances.
And then we got more of an audience, and we would do more shows, and, I got a bit of a reputation.
He's now an international superstar, darling, just emerging in a flurry of sequins on the world stage. But Hans has been working his shtick for 10 or 15 years.
And now look at me. I'm a monster.
The Fringe changed my life. Why? Because it shows that you have to do it yourself. When you're in a big theatre, they'll do everything for you. Do the sets, do this and that. But in the Fringe, you have to do everything, including going out and passing out the leaflet. It makes you strong. It makes you strong. I could face anything in the world now.
People come to me often and say, the Fringe changed my life.
People who just taught themselves it all, but they learnt how to do it.
It is the festival where acts are discovered, where people actually find their stage, be discovered by directors from other festivals.
We have people from cruise ships, we have people from talent shows on television.
There's people from all over the world that come here, and they're always looking out for that new thing.
And there's more competition now. So the Fringe is more challenging than ever for the artist. You have to get the word of mouth out.
It's a word of mouth festival. But these days, word of mouth is a lot easier because everybody's on the social media, everybody's on the Twitter, the Facebook, the Tinder, the Grindr, the Christian Mingle. They're on it all, darlings.
We are here to reveal the 2020 poster, the 60th anniversary of the Adelaide Fringe, believe it or not.
It has become so successful around the world. It is the largest cultural meeting in the Southern Hemisphere.
You could put it in your pocket, like when I was a kid. And now, it's like a Mooney wedding. It takes over the entire landscape. It's enormous.
It's taken over Adelaide. The Fringe was really a fringe then, but now the Fringe is a fringe,
Keeps moving, keeps changing. And I know that from other places, people go, oh, this Fringe used to be great. It was all plays. It was all very beautiful plays. But things change, the interests of people change.
It's going to grow and it's going to change. It's going to suit different generations, as it has.
I think the arts I've got to bring people together in different ways. And I think we'll come back to basics. You know, the art of communication, the art of storytelling, and the art of really being receptive to how we need to live together in the spirit of humanity. Because, you know, we were on the fringe, you know, but now we're in and a part of the circle that sits within it. I think that's just going to grow, and that's, I guess, the hope for the coming generations in the coming years.
Hello Adelaide Fringe Festival. Funny lady and Fringe Ambassador Judith Lucy here.
Happy birthday, Fringe.
Happy birthday, Fringe. I can't believe you're 60.
I wish you another 60 years of happiness, a great fortune, and 60 years beyond that, another 180 years beyond that, and to continue in this fashion until the end of the world.
It's appropriate that you're called Fringe because when you get older, you have a fringe to hide your wrinkles.
From Yalika and from the country that the fringe sits upon. Happy birthday.
Thank you for all you've done for Adelaide in 60 years.
Happy birthday, Fringe. If I was a cake, I'd be covering myself in whipped cream right now.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
60 years, and here's to 60 more. Long live the Adelaide Fringe.
Happy birthday. You've done very, very well.
Happy birthday. You've been very, very good to me. Hip, hip, hooray. See you at the bar.